Oh, man. E Jean Carroll. Did you know who she was? She's a columnist, a jury, a judge, a courtroom, awarding her $83 million out of Donald Trump's bank account. She claimed now multiple times that he defamed her by denying that he sexually assaulted her. That is marvelous. And E Jean Carroll's been on tour the last few days, absolutely celebrating all of this, saying she's going to do everything she can to defeat Trump. In fact, she's part of that process right now.
Ms. Carroll, you say it's nothing. You say the emperor has no clothes. The emperor is trying to run for president again.
And right now is leading.
And right now, the polls suggest it's a coin flip. It's very close. Have you heard from Joe Biden's campaign arm about potentially campaigning against the former president, Donald Trump?
No.
Are you interested in doing so?
Do anything I can.
That's a yes.
I will do anything I can, she said. In fact, that's the same thing that the funder of her lawsuit said, a guy by the name of Reid Hoffman. For more on all of this, I want to bring in Cheryl Chumley. She's the opinion editor and host of the Bold and Blunt podcast for the Washington Times and the author of the book Lockdown, The Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Cheryl, good to talk to you as always.
Hi, Vince. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So E Jean Carroll is obviously a loopy figure. But this case this week, it was jaw-dropping to hear that she was entitled to $83 million because Donald Trump denied that he sexually assaulted her?
Yeah, and don't forget that gets added to the $5 million of her earlier civil suit against Donald Trump. And look, that right there is the biggest issue. Donald Trump is one side of the story, and it's horrible what's happening to him. But for all of America, no matter what your political stripe is, you ought to be concerned that we're headed down a path in our legal system where denial translates into defamation. So what does this mean going forward? If Donald Trump goes out on the campaign trail and denies, still knowing this woman, denies that these accusations ever occurred, does that mean she's going to dip back into her pool of money provided, as you mentioned, by the CEO of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, an anti-Trumper, a Democrat supporter? Is she going to dip into that pool of money and sue again? I'm sure that's where we're headed.
I mean, yeah, it is maddening to think in anybody's case that denial alone can be the basis for defamation. That seems so crazy to me. I mean, if you've committed a crime against someone, that should be litigated in an actual criminal trial, not a civil one where you deny that you did something wrong and now you owe them money.
Yeah, and you know what? Follow it out, right? Even a little bit more. Say I call this woman right now a loon, and I believe that she's lying. Does that mean that I'm going to be guilty of defamation? Right? I mean, the consequences here are phenomenal if you carry out that logic.
Well, I guess it kind of depends. And one of the reasons it depends on who you vote for, probably, Cheryl, or who you seem to vote for. That may play a role in all of this. It's quite obvious that the left has been judge shopping, prosecutor shopping, jury shopping in order to reach these intended outcomes rather than to allow justice to be blind.
Yeah, and it's a shame that the facts, right, get just lost and pushed to the side because look at what Jean Carroll alleged with a cooler head, right? So she alleged that these incidents took place, this sexual abuse, rape is what she wanted to first call it, but she couldn't win on that. So the jury, anonymous jury, by the way, found sexual abuse, but not rape, which is curious. But she alleged this back in 1996. So like any, grieved, bereaved, upset rape victim, she goes home and waits, 25 years until the guy who committed this act on her was president, until she had a new book to promote, until she got the funding from Linked, right? Yes. And then New York passed a law that allowed her to sue because previously, under the current law in New York, she wouldn't have been allowed. So it's very odd.
Right. And it's not like Donald Trump had disappeared and was never heard from again based on her story. Like he went on to riches and fame, and he was everywhere. So if she was planning on jumping in to stop his rise, she could have jumped in at any moment during that career, which of course has been very public.
Yes, it was only until certain conditions were met, right? He was president, and the Democrats detested his policy, and Trump derangement syndrome was on the rise, and so forth.
Yes.
And so the political wind shifted, right? And here we are.
So last night, E. Jean Carroll, I mean, just to prove the seriousness of all of this, she went on MSNBC's Rachel Maddow to talk about all the fabulous things she's going to be buying now with Donald Trump's money. Take a listen.
You've talked about using some of Trump's money that you're about to get to help shore up women's rights. Do you know what that might be, what that might look like?
Yes, Rachel. Yes.
Tell me.
I had such great ideas for all the good I'm going to do with this money. First thing, Rachel, you and I are going to go shopping. We're going to get completely new wardrobes, new shoes, motorcycle for Crowley, new fishing rod for Robbie. Rachel, what do you want? Penthouse? It's yours,
Nothing.
Rachel. Penthouse and France? You want France? You want to go fishing in France? No? Oh, all right, okay.
That's a joke.
That was her attorney.
Although if me fishing in France could do something for women's rights, I would take the hit. You know, I would obviously take one for the team. All right, let me as if you need persuasion in that regard.
So, was this a cause for a big chuckle fest, do you think, Cheryl?
Yeah, it strikes me as a little bit bizarre, right? Especially against the backdrop that we just saw for years ago about Me Too movement,
Right.
where there were women who were seriously abused, right, by those in positions of power. And let's not forget, we have hanging in the air the whole Jeffrey Epstein so-called investigation, right,
Yes.
where there are victims out there who are waiting for their days in court but are being denied because so much of this information is being concealed and hidden from view. But yet we have somebody who hates Donald Trump with a political axe to grind,
Yes.
as I said, a book to sell and so forth. And now she goes on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow and giggles about how she's going to buy France and a motorcycle and fishing poles with her ill-gotten gains, is how I put it.
Also-
It's despicable.
You know, and if we're just to compare, apples to apples, presidential candidates to presidential candidates, Donald Trump's primary opponent, Joe Biden, has been accused of a variety of sexual assault. Tara Reid, we know for a fact, worked for the guy. Like the connection between Tara Reid, who made accusations against him, and Joe Biden is a lot more clear than any connection between E. Jean Carroll and a Bergdorf Goodman in the middle of whatever decade and Donald Trump. The relationship between those two is obvious. Also, Ashley Biden's diary has emerged. She's alleged sexual misconduct on the part of Joe Biden when he showered with her. And these are real pieces of evidence that exist. And yet I'm not seeing any court cases moving through. In fact, I think Tara Reid has fled the country.
Not to mention the videos of creepy Joe fondling little girls' hair and so forth, right?
Yes.
So the good news, though, I guess the standard now is if Joe Biden denies any sort of sexual improprieties towards these women, then he can be sued in civil court for defamation, right? Because that seems to be the new standard going forward.
Right. Yeah, I guess that the upside to having a compliant media is that he's never asked about it. So there's no circumstance where he could defame Tara Reid because nobody ever asked. Although Biden did deny it, just so people are clear. Biden denied the assault allegation against Tara Reid, so she, I guess, presumably would have a basis for this. Maybe it depends on the state, because New York moved heaven and earth to change state law to accommodate this left-wing hit job against Trump.
And let's remember, the law changes back, right? It expires, coincidentally, in November. So the whole law-changing thing alone should have been red flags and alarms going off in people's minds that there was something more than just a truthful allegation going through an unbiased court. That there was political weaponization of the court system and exploiting this woman, using her to defame and attack Donald Trump as he's campaigning for president.
Can you talk more about the role that left-wing money plays, or more specifically anti-Trump money plays in all of this? We were talking about Reid Hoffman, big tech guy, very rich, the co-founder of LinkedIn. He finances this whole thing. He says publicly that his goal is to destroy Trump, and so that's obvious why he's funding this lawsuit. He's also, by the way, funding Nikki Haley's campaign. How important is all of this left-wing money to trying to subvert our republic?
Well, I think it's definitely a question, right, that people should be asking. Just because a left-winger finances some agenda that could actually accomplish something that's in line with that agenda, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a conflict of interest, or it doesn't necessarily mean that lies are being told. But when you look at Reid Hoffman's funding of this woman's case, along with his statements, with all the other curiosities that surround this entire case, you have to come to the conclusion that had it not been for left-wing Reid Hoffman funding her, then it would have been a little bit more difficult for her to proceed, right? And in that vein, there's definitely some sort of bias being shown on the part of these funders when they go after somebody like Jean Carroll to push her case through court.
And the rest of us, I mean, at the very least, should be made aware of it. I mean, you're right. People can spend money the way they want to, but the rest of us don't have to be suckers. We don't have to just go along with it and be like, oh yeah, E Jean Carroll, Reid Hoffman's candidate, Nikki Haley, over the weekend, she was sitting on TV and being like, I trust the jury. She said the jury, she trusts that, Donald Trump sexually assaulted E Jean Carroll and she's entitled to $83 million. I trust them. Like, what? The only reason she says something like that is because she's funded by the same guy E Jean Carroll was funded by.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, right? I mean, everybody can see through that. I expect the appeal to go forward, and like most of the other accusations and allegations against Donald Trump that have come through the years, his so-called impeachable offenses and Russia collusion, I expect that most of this is all going to drop by the wayside. Nothing seems to stick because most of this stuff, in the end, it ends up being made up, fabricated.
Right. But the point of it, as Nancy Pelosi once described, is to be a wrap-up smear. It's to kick up enough dirt and make the guy seem scandalous enough that people don't want to touch him, don't want to vote for him. And then once the truth finally comes out, the damage was done, right?
And a lot of times that's successful for the left, right? That's their go-to playbook, right? Just drum up lies and spins and keep the narrative going with their troll base on social media who don't even read the stories, just read the little 56-character headlines and so forth. But in this particular case with Donald Trump, it's not working, right? And the left is showing its hand, its desperation, because none of this stuff is working. If you look at Donald Trump's rallies versus Joe Biden's support base, it's totally opposite. The swell in America for Donald Trump is strong, and the Democrats cannot beat him on principles, pro-America policies, so they're falling back on their go-to playbook, which is to deceive and lie and so forth and slander.
Yeah, it's totally destructive. And by the way, the latest general election poll between Donald Trump and Joe Biden shows Trump ahead by a point. Emerson survey. So right now, Trump up. But still, somehow it's neck and neck. Worst president of our lifetimes, and somehow it's still neck and neck. Cheryl Chumley, thank you very much, as always, for your excellent work and your time today. Thank you.